The Republic is a book written by Plato in which his mentor, Socrates, engages in a dialogue with other ancient Greek citizens to try and discover an objective definition of justice. Justice is an important concept because it lays the groundwork for social norms, culture, and interpersonal communication. It allows us to interact with one another through a set of social rules based on the societal concept of justice. The entire book is written as a verbal dialogue, so it works quite well to analyze through the lens of interpersonal communication. Before speak about the context, contents of the book, it is important to understand the context in which this book was written. Plato was born in 428 BC, just 3 years after the Peloponnesian War began. It was a bloody and brutal war between the Greek city-states and Persia. The Greeks were vastly outnumbered and not governed by a central ruling system, and ultimately had to come together to defeat the Persians. Plato saw the gruesome results of the war, and it influenced him tremendously in writing the book. It is important to keep this in mind that Plato dreaded a civil war between the Greek city-states, and a large part of the book reflects that. Plato lived in a unique city-state within Greece called Athens. It was unique because it was a democracy. It was an aspect of the Athenian self-concept that made them very proud. That said, in 399 BC, the Athenian politicians executed Socrates under that democracy. The relationship between Plato and Socrates was very close, and this execution is also something that shaped the ideas developed in the Republic. The book began while Socrates and his friend Glaucon travel home from a religious festival. They encounter another traveling pair, Adimantus and Polymarch, who convince the two to take a detour to their house. At the house, they are joined by Polymarchus's father, Cephalus. Socrates is well known throughout the philosophy and history for asking the "what is it" question, asking people to provide an objective truth rather than search for relative results. The conversation starts out exactly in this manner. Socrates asks Cephalus, "What is it like to be so old?" Cephalus responds that he enjoys being old because he is no longer guided by his desires. He is happy because he has lived an honest life and lived up to his legal dues, so he expects to be rewarded in his next life. Socrates takes this response as a definition of justice. He says that Cephalus' definition of justice is being honest and living up to legal dues. Even though Cephalus never meant to speak of justice, Socrates challenges this definition by asking, if you borrow an axe from a friend to chop some wood, and upon returning it you discover your friend has gone insane, would you still return the axe? The answer is no, you would not, because you shouldn't give a weapon to an insane person. This simple hypothetical disproves the argument that Cephalus never even made. Cephalus isn't too interested in this conversation and bids farewell to the group, but the younger people in the group continue to engage in the conversation of justice. The conversation continues while many of the group contribute their own definitions, until finally Socrates gives a definition of justice. He explains that there are two types of justice: societal justice and individual justice. He begins by creating a scenario to describe societal justice. He begins by creating an ideal city in which everyone specializes at what they're best at. Socrates explains that this is the only way for cities productivity to be at maximum. He creates a class of individuals called the producing class, composed of farmers, doctors, and craftsmen. He explains that the city will only produce what is needed for the city to survive, calling it a healthy city. He then introduces luxury into the city. He says that the new classes of individuals arise in the city, such as merchants, actors, artists, and tutors. He says the excess wealth will lead to an expansion of territory, and war is inevitable. In order to protect the city, he outlines another class of individuals he calls guardians. He says the guardians need to be carefully selected for attributes such as spirit, honor, philosophy, and fitness. He concludes that nature cannot produce these types of individuals and says that nature should be protected and augmented with education. He says that education is the most important aspect of the city because without it, there will be no guardians for protection. This gets into an interesting part of the description of the city. In order to ensure there is no controversy over who should rule, he declares that all citizens will be told the myth of metals. This fiction persuades people to be patriotic. He declares that everyone is born with a metal mixed into their soul. Any person fit to rule has a gold soul, auxiliaries have silver souls, and producers have iron souls. He goes into even more detail about the lifestyle of guardians and the specifics regarding the city, how they should be educated, what their daily life should be. In all, he declares that the city is complete, saying that because everyone agreed that they have created the best city, they can be sure that it has all of the virtues. The virtues Socrates describes are wisdom, courage, moderation, and justice. Wisdom lies with the guardians and rulers because they know how the city should be run. The wisdom is in its city. Courage lies with the auxiliaries, as they are the ones who will fight to protect the city. Moderation and justice, unlike wisdom and courage, is spread out among the city as a whole. Moderation is identified with the agreement over who should rule, and justice, its complement, is the principle of specialization, that everyone will do the job they are best suited to do. After explaining societal justice, he moves on to individual justice. He explains that the soul is separated into three parts that stem from human desires. The rational part, lust for knowledge; the spirited part, lust for honor; and the appetitive part, lust for everything else: food, drink, sex, money. He explains that these three parts mirror the separation of classes within the city. Therefore, he finally provides a full definition of justice: proper arrangement of parts of the soul. He then explains that the person who has this proper arrangement of the soul will act accordingly with the intuitive norms of justice. He says that a just person will be ruled by the love of truth, and will not be in the grips of lust, greed, or desire for honor. Therefore, he assures that a just person will never steal, betray friends, commit adultery, disrespect parents, violate oaths or agreements, neglect gods, or commit any other unjust act. And thus concludes Socrates' definition of justice. Thank you.